In the tables that follow, a top is defined as more than 1 point faster than the previous top. A pair is defined as within 1 point either way of the previous top. An off race is more than 1 through 4 points worse than the top, and an X is more than 4 points worse. We did not use the 2020 Derby in any of our studies because it was run in September, not May. As we say every year, it's worth remembering that despite all the talk of how great they are training, most Derby runners will not run their race. About 2/3 run off races or X's. Only 2 or 3 horses a year run new tops, and some of those horses and tops are too slow to matter. Which means, in general, you want a horse that is already fast enough to be competitive, and this year that looks like one that has run faster than a Thoro-Graph 3. In terms of number of starts as a 3-year-old, 2 preps produces the most new tops, but 3 preps produces about the same percentage of combined new and pair tops. 4 or more starts as a 3-year-old has clearly been worse, with more than half running X's. The 2 patterns that have produced good performances in the Derby are those coming in off a pair of tops and coming in off a small new top. Both of those patterns have yielded over 40% new or paired tops. Every other pattern has produced terrible results. That includes those coming in following tops at 3 points or more. Over 80% of those don't run back to their last race, and most run X's. In general, very few run new tops unless they come into the Derby off a pair or a small new top. Every other pattern has produced terrible results, including those coming in following bigger tops. About 80% of them don't run their race, and most run X's. The other thing that turns out to be significant is the amount of development from the horse's 2-year-old top to his 3-year-old top. Horses that have already developed more than 4 points almost never run new tops in the Derby, and more than half run X's. Horses that have not already developed that much have done much better. We've established 3 criteria for horses that run well in a Derby. Horses with 3 or less preps, horses coming in off either a pair of tops or a small new top, and horses that have not developed more than 4 points from their 2-year-old top. Now let's break it down by how horses have run relative to how many of those boxes they checked. Not surprisingly, there was direct correlation between the number of boxes checked and how the horses ran. Those that checked all 3 boxes at least paired their top more than half the time. But remember, that just means the horse ran well relative to his previous top, not well compared to the other horses. He still has to be fast enough for it to matter. As always, the Derby has a huge field, so ground loss will be a major factor. Averages can be misleading, and ground loss varies greatly with running style and race shape. Having said that, on average, the inside 5 posts have been about 3 paths closer to the rail on the turns than the outside 5 posts in past Derbies. Each path on each turn is worth a length, which in turn is worth 1/2 Thoro-Graph point at this distance. So if one horse gets a rail trip and another is 3 wide on both turns, that's a 2-point advantage to the inside horse. Flip them, and it's a 4-point swing. Post position, running style, and jockey's tendencies matter a lot in the Derby. There's a long run to the first turn of the Derby, and with a mix of speed horses and closers, the field should spread out, and riders should be able to get the positions they want. The real action will come on the second turn. Many of these will be backing up, and there will be traffic. Catalytic has already outrun his dam and siblings, none of whom broke 10 on the Thoro-Graph scale. This one jumped way forward in the Florida Derby to a 6-point new top. He would need another forward move now and is a lot more likely to bounce, especially since Joseph hasn't done as well at Churchill as he has elsewhere. Catching Freedom, on the other hand, is out of a fast mare that has now produced 3 foals, all of which could run. This colt has moved forward gradually with his races well spaced, and with 3 preps, coming off a pair of tops, checks 2 boxes. The issue is that he's already developed 5 points from his 2-year-old top, and he's not that fast relative to the field. The significant forward move he needs is unlikely. Domestic product checks all 3 boxes. He's had just 2 preps, is coming off a pair, and hasn't developed too much this year. In fact, he hasn't developed at all, which is not great either. This guy starts way slow and is highly unlikely to make a huge jump now. Puka has produced a couple of horses who could run, including last year's Derby winner, Mage. And with his solid figures and pattern last year, Dornoch looked like he might be heading somewhere good. But he hasn't gotten a step faster this year. And though he checks all 3 boxes, he starts out too slow to contend. Encino was slow last year, jumped forward in March, and exploded last time in his first try on dirt, to a figure that makes him borderline competitive here. This guy is anti the Derby profile in terms of both the jump and especially development. But with only 1 race on dirt, it's hard to know whether the rules apply. And this is a Godolphin horse. They get big efforts in big races. On balance, we think he's more likely to bounce than not on just 3 weeks rest. But he makes us nervous. Endlessly would be way too slow even if he was as good on dirt as he is on synthetic and grass. And he's probably not. Epic Ride is similar to Encino, with a jump in his first dirt try, after having developed a lot. But he's a little slower, and this one is not Godolphin. Fierceness ran big in his debut, threw in a stinker in a Champagne, then exploded with a gigantic figure for a 2-year-old to win the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. After a mediocre comeback effort at Gulfstream, Pletcher gave him 8 weeks, and he came back with a monster effort in the Florida Derby. That figure places him 3 to 4 points ahead of the strongest other contenders, which equates to 6 to 8 lengths. So the obvious question is, what's he likely to do now? Well, we have lots of data to help us answer that question. So first of all, it turns out that horses that come into the Derby off a -1 or faster have run just about the same relative to their own ability as the general horse population has in Derby. As for Pletcher, he's been bad at getting new tops in the Derby, but otherwise is about average. Having said that, 3 things. 1, Fierceness is much faster than everyone else going in and figures to get a clean trip on or near the lead. So even if he backs up 4 points, he still is a very likely winner. And remember, an off race in our studies is up to 4 points off a horse's top. So in this case, you have to add up the first 3 columns. 2, what makes Fierceness almost unique of the horses that have come into the Derby off a negative figure is that he also has a negative figure as a 2-year-old, which means that monster Florida Derby figure is less than a 2-point new top. 3, and since he has also only developed 2 points from his 2-year-old top, Fierceness checks all 3 boxes. And all that means Fierceness has a good chance to run his race or close to it and makes him a very strong favorite. Forever Young marched forward as a 2-year-old in Japan, jumped to a new top in Saudi Arabia, and paired that effort in Dubai. Taking Fierceness out of the equation, the next fastest group comes in around the 1 level, and this is one of them. He also comes in off 2 preps and a pair of tops and only fails to check 1 box since he's already developed 5 points, which makes a repeat very possible, but another short-term forward move less likely. 2 other things to note. Trainer Yahagi has had 2 starts in his country, both in the Breeders' Cup, and both were wins. He knows what he's doing. But also note this horse has been getting wide trips, supposedly because he hates kickback. He cannot do that here in a big field. If he does, he will waste a good effort. Grand Mo the First has had 3 preps and is coming off a pair of tops. but he's already developed 5 points and he's still way too slow. Honor Marie marched straight down to a good top as a 2-year-old. He came back from his winter break with a stinker in the slop at Fairgrounds, then returned to his top in his last. With 2 preps and a lot of rest, this horse checks all the boxes and is one of the most likely horses in the Derby to run a new top. The problem is he starts out several points too slow, so it would have to be a real big new top, and he's going to face trip problems coming from far back in a huge field. This colt has the pattern and pedigree of a late developer. We'll look for him later on, possibly on grass, where his siblings and dam ran their best. Like his daddy, Just a Touch both didn't race at 2 and came out running as a 3-year-old. This colt was run the same strong figure in all 3 starts, so technically he comes in off 3 preps and a pair of tops. And there's no way to measure development since he didn't race last year. So far, Brad Cox's results in the Derby have been about average, and the most likely possibility is that Just a Touch throws the same figure again, though it would not be a shock to see him run a new top. But even if he doesn't, he has tactical speed that will be very useful here, and he's definitely in the next group behind Fierceness. You will almost never hear the words Wayne Lucas and lightly raced in the same sentence, and Just Steel will be making his 12th start in the Derby. This horse jumped to a big new top in November, bounced, then returned quickly to his top, going 2 turns. After another bounce, he broke through a new top, earning the same figure as Muth due to a wide trip. This colt doesn't check all 3 boxes because he made 4 starts this year, but he's off only a 1.5 point top with the same amount of development since last year, so he checks the other 2 and he's fast. Thoro-Graph went electronic in 1994, so we don't have half of Lucas' Derby starters in the database. What we do have is a decent sample size, and his runners have done better than average, with over 40% at least pairing their tops. Additionally, Lucas' horses have been running well recently, and he's gotten several to run big new tops. With 5 weeks rest, we expect Just Steel to run well, but he has to avoid another wide trip. Mugga 2 is even more heavily raced than Just Steel. He finally broke through with a new top last time, but even if he can avoid a bounce, he's way too slow. Just like with Torpedo Anna, McPeak got 2 good races out of Mystic Dan last year, then ran him back a 3rd time on short rest and got a bounce. In his 2nd start this year, this colt ran the best figure in this field by someone not named Fierceness. And this time, McPeak was smart enough to give him 2 months to recover. It was clear the horse still had to bounce off the 6-point top, and he did, but not badly. Now he's had 5 weeks rest and 13 weeks to recover from the big jump. Historically, McPeak's runners have not run well in the Derby, with only 1 matching his previous top. As previously stated, top bounce has not been good in the Derby, and we would not be surprised to see Mystic Dan go either way off this pattern. But again, when McPeak is hot, everything he sends out fires. So we'll be watching his Derby week runners. This is the 2nd fastest horse going in, and it'll be a price. Resilience ran a couple of decent 2-year-old figures and finally broke through in his 3rd start this year when they added blinkers. This horse has never gone back, and he does look a little like Mine That Bird did, but off the jump we think he's more likely to pair than go forward, and there are a bunch of horses who go into the race several points faster. Remember, 90% of Derby runners do not run new tops. Sierra Leone established a strong 2-year-old top in his 2nd start, matched it at Fairgrounds in a slop, and broke through with a big new top last time. The first thing to note is that 4 horses in this Derby have already run faster than Sierra Leone, so he'll probably need a new top to win. And though he checks 2 boxes, that kind of jump is more likely to produce a bounce than produce a pair, let alone a new top. Additionally, though he has had only 7 starters, Chad Brown has yet to get a new top in the Derby. And even if he can go forward again, this one will have to do it from far back in a huge field. There's a decent chance Sierra Leone will run well enough to get a piece of this, but he's a major underlay in the win pool. Society Man got in a fast track last time for the first time this year and exploded with a big new top. It's too big a jump and represents too much development to produce the new top he would need to contend. Stronghold had a flat pattern as a 2-year-old and is only marginally faster this year. This colt checks all 3 boxes and could run a new top, but he starts out too slow. The only figure we have for T.O. Password isn't terrible, and with only 2 lifetime starts, he certainly could go forward. But there are a lot more 3-year-olds that can run a 5 that can run the 3 or more points faster he would need to compete here. While too much development from 2 to 3 doesn't produce good Derby efforts, no development at all isn't great either. And in the case of Track Phantom, who hasn't got back to his 2-year-old top in 3 starts this year, it's a problem. West Saratoga is heavily raced, struggled to get back to his 2-year-old top, and is slow. This one's future might be on grass. As we do every year, we're going to divide the Derby field into 4 groups. The D group contains horses we can't use even in superfectas because they are just too slow. There are 10 horses in this group, a big number, partly because the serious contenders this year are unusually strong. The D group is Catalytic, Domestic Product, Dornoch, Endlessly, Epic Ride, Grand Mo the First, Society Man, Stronghold, Track Phantom, and West Saratoga. The C group has the horses that we don't really like, but that we could see sneaking into the exotics and some of the stronger contenders don't fire. Catching Freedom, Honor Marie, and Resilience. We're also putting T.O. Password into this group because we really have no idea where else to put him. Remember where we started. Very few horses run new tops in the Derby, so you want to use horses that are already fast. This year's B group is very strong. In an ordinary year, some of these would be A's. Forever Young, Just a Touch, Just Steel, and Mystic Dan go here. And we're going to put Sierra Leone here as well, just because of number power. But the A group this year contains just 1 horse. Fierceness starts out way faster than everyone else, and he figures to get a clean trip on or near the lead. If he goes back 3 points, he's almost a sure winner, and might be a winner if he goes back 4. So the question is, what's the chance of him going back more than that? Because basically, that's the chance of him losing this Derby. We make it about 50% that Fierceness will run no worse than 3 or 4 points of his top, and therefore about even money that he will win the Derby, which is a very big number in a 20-horse field. So the bottom line of the Derby is that, first of all, we were happy to see Encino come out because we had no idea what to do with him. None of the serious contenders were hurt by the draw. With his early speed and a long run to the turn, Fierceness will probably only be outside of 1 horse when they make a left turn. And though we don't love Velasquez on closers, there's nobody better at getting a speed horse to relax. It'll be interesting to see whether they try to drop in with Forever Young or just keep him in the clear. All the other B horses drew very well, especially Just a Touch. Giroux usually is aggressive in big races, and this one might end up saving ground right behind his speed. We make the B horses a little under 10% each to win the race, which combined with Fierceness leaves about 10% for the rest of the field. Combined. All of which leaves Fierceness an overlay at 2-1, Sierra Leone an underlay at 4-1, and the rest of the B horses value, especially in the exotics.